Hi students, good evening. I hope you are all doing well, and also I hope you might have listened to my lecture on the canonization, lecture 1 on canonization, in which I have given you a good an introduction to Donne's poetry and how his poetry is fresh, and also what metaphysical features that we can find in his poetry that we have seen. So now it is the poem that we were discussing, and we have finished stanza 1. Anyhow, I will just start sharing my screen, and then we'll continue the poem. So the first stanza, for God's sake, hold your tongue and let me laugh. This is what we have already discussed, and I've explained you how done in this stanza, in the very beginning. Of course, the beginning of the poem itself presents us the features of or the characteristics of metaphysical poetry. So the first line itself is an example of dramatic beginning, which we have already discussed how Donne's poems were very dramatic. And also we have seen that abrupt beginning is what is the what you call feature of the metaphysical poetry, and Donne's poem is revealing those two, dramatic and abrupt beginning. And then the theme, of course, is love. Love is one of the themes of metaphysical poetry, and the first line reflects that also. And then referring to all those worldly things. Okay, so the worldly love, also worldly love, and then things, all other, like disease and age, and then fortune, ruined fortunes, and king's stamped face, and all these, they are also actually worldly things that the metaphysical deals, and through physical it travels to travels beyond the physical. So that is what we will see. And then we have to see, we can witness the audacious nature of the lover, the speaker of the poem, which of course we can identify with Donne. As I have told you in while introducing Donne's poetry and the greatness of Donne's poetry, that Donne appears in multiple what do you say, personalities in his poetry, starting from the libertine rake to the spiritual father, spiritual servant of God. So this actually we can see one side of Donne here, okay, who is very much impatient, intolerant, and that is why he is chiding his friend for disturbing him in his love issue, the matter of love. So he's saying that he's simply asking him to shut his mouth, and then and he is advising him to do his business, to mind his own business, in other words. So, and usually we keep saying, no, when people are intruding into our private zones or private areas or affairs, we naturally will tell them to take care of their things, that is to follow their limits. So that is how Donne here also is simply asking the listener in the poem. So though the listener is present, um, but the listener is not active, very passive. Okay, so he is asking the listener to do many things, but not to do one thing, that is disturbing him in his love. So you do whatever you want, but please don't disturb me. So he is saying that I am asking you to do all those things that I have mentioned, so that you will let me to love. Then coming to the second stanza, he says, "Alas, alas, who's injured by my love?" He's questioning. Now, the first stanza, it's very much established that he is in neck deep love with his beloved, and he doesn't want anyone to disturb his love, or doesn't want anyone to advise him in this matter. Okay, though it is causing him a loss, or he's not getting married, his love is not requited, and he's getting aged, yet he doesn't want anyone to advise him. So this stanza, we have all questions. Okay, now the declarative, the previous stanza is very declarative. Now it is all, questions. So he is saying, asking, "Alas, alas, who is injured by my love?" So see, love is between two people, and in other words, in this question we can take, no, the outside world has nothing to do with the lovers physically, the two lovers who are involved in love, and of course they are not harming anyone. So they are looking, they are happy in their world, they are happy in their world, they are looking in to their matters, they are not poking into the affairs of others. So when we are um, taking care of our love, or we are engrossed in love, who is injured by our love? Okay, by my love, he is asking, who is injured by my love? If I am in love, whatever suffering or happiness, he will be facing that, but why others are bothered about that? That is why he's asking, "Alas, alas, who is injured by my love? What merchant ships have my sighs drowned?" So here I should tell you one more thing. The metaphysical poetry is very much known for its hyperbolic statements, exaggerated statements, okay, and then far-fetched images, or what you call far-fetched, uh, excuse me, comparisons. And it's believed in the love, um, people often give sighs, is giving out a deep breath. Okay, so he's when you, of course, when you take breath, you take air in, and when you sigh out, that means you breathe out, you, of course, air comes, so little bit of air, but will will that air uh, move, or make even a strand of hair to move? We are not sure. Okay, but here see, Dunn is asking, what merchant ships have my sighs drowned? So very exaggeration. A sigh that is coming out of our nose, especially lovers, whatever strongly they may breathe out, can it drown a merchant ship? See, the merchant ship is also a very representative of that age, because in the 17th century England, trade began, science and technology began, people started explorating many new lands, new areas of knowledge, etc. So England was very, much into the business. Merchant ships are very popular. So they are trade with the world. That we know. This is how they have been. They were everywhere, and they have colonized many nations of many continents, that we know. So this actually, is becoming very vibrant. The situation of a trade, and people going on voyages, and English people building great or big merchant ships, etc., was very much there. So he is referring to that, his contemporary period, and then he is hyperbolically stating that, because I am in love, are my are my sighs drowning the merchant ships? And then one more. Who says my tears have overflowed his ground? Of course, sometimes love is not only happiness, there may be tears also. If even if I am crying, are my tears going to overflow his ground? Flooding. Overflow is flooding. If anyone's ground is being flooded because of my tears, another hyperbolic statement. When did my colds a forward spring remove? So cold, this is this cold here is physical cold, and of course it is a, what you call, an a symbol for winter. Okay, so because of my colds, is the spring going to be delayed, forward spring remove? So is the spring going to be disturbed because of my colds? When did the heats which my veins fill add one more to the plague bill? See, plague, is a disease. Okay, plague is a disease, and I think it is, mm, uh, you know, it occurs in summers. Okay, so he says that, mm, because generally we know that youngsters are hot blooded, and their bodies are hot, that we know, and it is even more hot when you are in love, you know so lovers pining for one another. So it might be due to the physical passion, or mental emotions, or whatever it is. It is a fact that the body of young men and women will be having more heat, and this he is referring. And this heat in young people, of course, even more intensifies than in the normal times, and that is what he is referring to here. So he says, when did the heats which my veins fill, which is there in my body, is adding one more to the plague bill. No, plague bill is, in those days, plague used to be very rampant, and there was no medicine, and the government used to make a record of all the deaths. See how nowadays we are in the corona days, and how government is also making a record of the corona deaths. Like the similar manner, plague in those days is um, pandemic, and then not pandemic means what, um, what the word I am not getting. This is in antuvyadi, and then people used to die easily. So many numbers, sometimes hundreds and thousands of people used to die. So this is usually it occurs in summer. So then this here the speaker is referring to that kind of plague bill which the government in those days used to maintain. So he is questioning, he is asking, because of my love and the heat that is coming out of my body, is it adding anyone to the plague bill? Is it causing death to anyone? So obviously, for all these questions, the answer is no. And of course, what we have to understand here is the hyperbolic statements, and then comparisons, a sigh, and then the tears, and then cold, and the heat. To what they are compared? Heat, the body heat is compared to summer season. Our cold is some compared to winter, and then the tears to the water, and then sighing to the tempest or cyclone, etc. So very hyperbolic, exaggerated statements that you can see here. This is a very novel way of putting ideas in those days. Okay, then following he says, soldiers find wars and lawyers find out still litigious men, which quarrels move, though she and I do laugh. So what he wants to say that because we are in love, the world is not going to change. See, soldiers are still finding wars, in the 17th century England, because of explorations and other, occupying other lands, etc. There are wars, okay? And lawyers, Spencer also refers to lawyers, where there used to be the Templar Knights, okay? There all lawyers have taken place, buildings that are built on the banks of Thames, the river Thames, he means. So lawyers are there and they are able to find the litigious men. So they're finding cases. Soldiers are finding wars. That means what? The world is running as it is. The world is moving as it is, or as it used to be when we are not in love. So even after we are in love, there is no change in the world. Nothing is going to happen. Nothing untoward is going to happen as ships drowning or grounds flooded, and then springs being delayed, or heat increasing, and plague bills are being what do you say increased. So that is not happening. In other words, with all these hyperbolic statements, and also the last lines, what he says, soldiers finding wars in a normal state of affairs. Oh, in spite of our love, nothing has changed. Then why others should worry about? In other words, what he is going to ask is, when everything is normal with this world, even though I and she are in love, why you are very much worried about that? Why people are not allowing us to love? So this is what you can actually think in the normal, what do you say, in our society also. This is not only the 17th century scenario where lovers are not led to have to be in their own world, because love is not a private affair, it becomes a public affair. So in a similar manner, that was there in those times also, it is like that, and he is questioning. So the second stanza is very much known for the hyperbolic statements, exaggerated statements, and also witty, somewhat wit, of course, comes in. What merchant ships drowning, the size drowning the merchant ships. Of course, you can very well, uh, you know, think that it is very humorous, or the idea is very, what you call, the idea is very novel or fresh. Okay, and then uh, of course, all the ideas that are presented in these each line, of course, appear very fresh, because we have seen three great representative poets previously, where you did not get any comparison like this, or hyperbolic statements, etc. And moreover, love and lovers, how they are being disturbed by the world and the worldly elements. That is why he is asking, saying that the world is going on as it is normally, even though she and I love. And then in the next stanza, what he says, okay, uh, call us what you will, we are made such by love. So, okay, you think you disturb us very much, okay? Though nothing is changing in this world, the world is very much entering into the sphere of their love. So, okay, let the world come into. So then after stating that he's not happy with the world which is intruding into his love affair, etc., even though nothing is getting affected because we are in love, it's a kind of, what you call as frustration, or his displeasure, okay, not happy with the things that are happening around him because he is in love. Now he, in this stanza, he enters into a kind of, acceptance, a mood of acceptance, where he want to acquiesce with everyone, and also, okay, whatever you want, because we are in love, whatever you want to, you call us what you will. We are made such by love. Actually, Shakespeare also, in spite of all his love sonnets, etc., he says lovers lunatics. Okay, so that means mad people. Lovers are considered as mad people. So this world actually always names lovers as mad only. So that is why he is saying that whatever you want to call, you call. Call her one, me, another fly. So fly, the house fly. Okay, that means very insignificant. So now, he say, if you want to consider us as insignificant creatures, okay, make us like that. We are tapers too, and at our own cost die. Taper is a candle, and he says, we are not only insignificant, but we are also like candles. Candles, of course, we have all the adages, candles burn and to give us light. That means they are burning, means it's like a death for them. So he says, we are like tapers, and we may die in our happiness. We may at our own cost die, and we in us find the eagle and the dove. So we devour each other, eagle and dove. Eagle and dove are two birds. Eagle, dove becomes the prey. Eagle is a predator, like it hunts. So he's telling them that if you want, you consider us very insignificant, and you can call us the fly, and we are also like candles or tapers which burn at their own cost, and we in us find the eagle and the dove. So we devour each other, devour eagle and dove. Here you can take eagle as man and dove as women. And then the phoenix riddle hath more wit by us. Phoenix is a bird, a mythological bird. We don't know whether it exists on the earth or not. It dies, and out of the ashes, another bird comes out. That means what? One. At any time, it is one. So that means he says that we will burn in our love and be one. Okay. By us, we two being one are it. So he says that the phoenix riddle suits us very much because we are two physically, but we are one like phoenix. So to one neutral thing, both sexes fit. So phoenix bird, one neutral thing, both sexes fit. We die and rise the same and prove mysterious by this love. See, in the beginning lines, he vexed with the worldly interference into their love, the orbit of love. He relapses into a kind of acquiescing with whatever the world is giving, and he started considering themselves very insignificant, but gradually building one after the other. See, we are first, he says fly, very insignificant, then tapers, it a very significant what do you say, symbolism is there, and then he says eagle and dove, and then phoenix riddle. Okay, phoenix is the mythological bird, and he says we will become one like phoenix, in which both sexes are there. Okay, so we die and rise the same and prove mysterious by this love. So he says, as the phoenix dies and the other comes out of the ashes, we will also prove like that. We both two bodies become one soul, and then we will rise, and same we will prove as mysterious as phoenix. See, gradually, he developed the idea in of their love, gradually from an insignificant thing to a very significant, mysterious thing. Okay, in this stanza, and then he says, we can die by it if not live by love. So the world is very much harassing, the world is very much intruding, the world is very much into their love, though their love did not affect the world in any manner. In any manner, these two people, the lover, the beloved and the lover, cannot affect the world in any manner, yet the world is after them. The world is after them for different reasons. Okay, so he says, if we are not able to live, we will die by this love. And if unfit for tombs and heirs, our legend be, it will be fit for verse. Okay, we have monumental tombs, take for example Taj Mahal. One of the wonders of the world is a tomb. So he is maybe there was practice in history building great tombs for great people. So um, because we are lovers, this world may not consider us great, and to build great tombs or and hers. Okay, the lines on the tombs, our legend be. So our story will not be remembered when we won't have any tombs or monumental tombs, etc., but we will fit for verse. So like Shakespeare, he says that all statues, all monuments will get collapsed or destroyed, but the life will be immortal in the verse. In the similar manner, Donne also is saying that our story will be very much alive in the verse, and he says that our story will very much fit into the verse. And if no piece of chronicle we prove, history, chronicle is history which is chronicled, it is written down. So the lovers, if he says that if we can't live, we will die. If the death of these lovers, if it is not considered as something that should that can be written down, he says that we will build in sonnets pretty rooms. So though this worldly powers, worldly kings or queens may not take our love story or our lives as a matter of, or as an issue of chronicle, he says that we will certainly will live in sonnets pretty rooms. That means poetry. Okay, as well a well wrought urn becomes the greatest ashes as half acre tombs, and by these hymns all shall approve us canonized for love. So now we will the pretty rooms, now urns are kept in pretty rooms, a beautiful urn is like a flower vase, which are having designs, etc. There's sometimes people will keep the ashes also, and they built half-acre tombs like we have pyramids. Okay, like that he says, and by these hymns all shall approve us canonized for love. So we may not fit to become the monumental tombs, or we may not be a legend, or whatever it is, but he says that we may not be, our love may not be chronicled yet. He thinks that we will be like a well wrought urn, which is kept in the in the tombs and by these hymns. He says, if not, we will be in museums, we will be in hymns. And everybody, when we are being celebrated, when our love is being celebrated, our story is being celebrated in the rhymes or sonnets or songs, etc., all will approve that we are canonized for love. So he's actually, I forgot to give you the introduction of canonization. The title itself is very metaphysical. It exhibits a metaphysical character, because canonization is a very spiritual process where a person is canonized or ordained to be the servant of the Lord. So this is a process which the church will be performing to make someone like the servants of Lord. But here, to what purpose he is using it? It is for lovers. See, that is a very spiritual, religious ceremony. Here, it is lovers being canonized. That means, Donne has taken a very religious, ceremonial, the word of canonization or a process to make lovers as saints. So this is what, this gradually in the third sonnet we have seen that if not we are being allowed to live in this world, we will die. So after death they will be like saints of love. That is why gradually he brings this worldly, physical, mundane love into a spiritual, holy type of love, and thus involve us, you whom reverend love made one another's hermitage, you to whom love was peace, that now is rage, who did the whole world's soul contract and drove into the glasses of your eyes, so made such mirrors and spies that they did all to you epitomize, countries, towns, courts, beg from above, a pattern of your love. So he says, and thus invoke us. He says, we will be canonized by love. When we will be canonized by love, people will invoke us. Actually, we invoke God. We invocation of muses we have seen in Spenser. So similarly, he is saying that when we are canonized by love, we will be invoked, okay, by people. Why? Because whom reverend love, the reverend pastor, okay, reverend love made one another's hermitage, because we are like saints, we made one another's body our hermitage, you to whom love was peace, that now is rage. Love is peaceful to you, but nowadays it is not like that. Who did the whole world's soul contract and drove into the glasses of your eyes? So they live in the eyes of one another. They looked, the whole world is nothing for them, but the world lies in the eyes of the beloved and the lover. For the lover, the eyes of the beloved is the world, and the beloved The eyes of lover are the is the world. So they are the ideal lovers. They, that is why he is saying that once we are canonized in the name of love, we will become saints. And that is why people will invoke us, people will pray us, because they have all the reverence for us. Because we made our souls our hermitage, and our eyes are our worlds, and means one another's eyes are one another's world. So made such mirrors and such spies that they did all to you epitomize. So they, every after our death, people will praise us, will appreciate our love, and our love will become epitomized. Countries, towns, courts beg from above a pattern of your love. It says that people will be taking us as ideal lovers, and they want to emulate us, they want to follow us. He says, after canonized, after they are canonized, actually he is saying that how they will become the saints of love. So once, if they can't live, because the world is not letting them to live in peace because they loved each other, the world is intruding very much into their love. So it is, they say that the speaker of the poem is saying that if we are not able to live by our love, what we will do, we will actually die, and will be the saints of love. That is, they are canonized for love. Okay, for love, this but uh, done, actually beginning with the worldly love, gradually transforms this into a kind of holy love, where the lovers become the saints of love, granting prayers onto the earth, and all lovers praying to these saints of love. How he makes the worldly love into a spiritual love. This is one of the popularly anthologized and prescribed poem of Donne, and there is much research also has gone into in analyzing this poem. Um, Actually, Clent Brooks is one prominent new critic, where he gives uh, a great analysis of this poem, stating that this is a poem of paradox. A paradox is nothing but putting two things, two different things into one combination, or one what do you call one putting in one plane, two different things are taken here. The paradox is the physical love, okay, and then how it turns to be the saints, the worldly lovers become saints, okay, spiritual holy saints. This is the paradox. And there are many other ways of analyzing these poems, this poem, especially Donne's poem. The first important question that can be asked is to consider Donne's canonization as a metaphysical poem. So, what are the metaphysical characteristics that you find? I've been explaining from the beginning how this is full of wit, which is a metaphysical feature, and abrupt and dramatic beginning, that is also metaphysical feature, and the hyperbolic statements, okay, exaggerations, is also a metaphysical feature, and the theme itself, the title itself, indicates the metaphysical feature. And then the treatment of physical love, and then transforming it to a spiritual world, is also a metaphysical characteristic. So afterlife, this is afterlife, this is metaphysical. One of the characteristics of metaphysical poetry is dealing with afterlife, what happens, what afterlife, No, we don't know what happens, but Dan has given. If they can't live by their love, if they die, what is going to happen? Afterlife is metaphysical. Okay, is presented here. So, with this much analysis, I'm closing the poem here. We'll try to start the next. A poem, that is Andrew Marvell's To His Coy Mistress, in the next lecture. I'll be giving you a handout regarding the analysis of this poem and some of the important themes, etc. You need not worry. And of course, whatever I have given regarding the poet, introduction to the poet, that you can write down some important essay page of information you can write down, so that you can write that information about the poet in whatever question that you are going to attempt on this poem. Okay, have a nice time. Bye.